Alright guys, I thought I would show you all the stuff I picked up at GenCon. Now the exhibitor hall was very large and very busy, but I knew I wanted to go to 4 certain publishers' booths. So all I did was look up where they were, went in the exhibit hall, went right to their booth, got what I wanted, and got right back out. I did not do any other shopping other than picking up the RPGs that I was on a mission to get. So let's go through them. First off, I got Orbital Blues by Soul Muppet Publishing. This I'm super excited about. Let me just read you a little bit about what's on the back of the book here. It says, "This is the rock and roll future that never was and nobody wanted. It's an intergalactic age of bounty hunters, vagrants, and bleeding heart outlaws. The galaxy is a lawless expanse, and you are an interstellar outlaw. Together with your ship and your crew, you must eke out a living on the frontier and chase down the intergalactic dream of freedom and success." So it's kind of like, it says it's offbeat sci-fi, cooperative storytelling. I'm super excited about this one. I jotted down some notes too as well about the mechanics. Basically in Orbital Blues, you have 3 stats. You have muscle, grit, and savvy. You don't roll to get a stat and then look up a modifier like D&D. It literally gives you the modifiers. So you put a +2 in one, a +1 in another, and then a +0 in the other, but you get to choose. So there's no specific archetypes for character building in this, other than page 15 and 16 kind of have these little titles where it says you pick a title, and you can assign one of these to the other people in the party too, so for you. So you've got like, it has things like the stray, the rescue, the snake, the muse, the chef, the rogue, the wheels, the lonely heart, the dreamer, the kid, the artist. So you don't really have like an archetype, a typical archetype, but I think it sounds really interesting. So there's a measure, also a measure of your physical health and well-being by your heart score, and a measure of your past sins, personal grievances, guilty hang-ups that indicate growth and experience, your blues score, which I thought was really interesting. You have what are called gambits, which are talents, tricks, or relatable assets you use to get the job done. And you also start with a trouble, which is a summation of a past misgiving, misdeed, vice, or regret. And you answer some questions at the beginning of the game during character creation. And the other ones kind of get answered during play and reward you with blues points when you do that. So this is a 2d6 system. You roll 2d6 and add the necessary stat, and anything 8 and an up is a success. You can make the roll easier than average by adding a 3rd d6 and dropping the lowest number, and you can make stuff harder by rolling a 3rd d6 and dropping the highest number, and those are called getting the upper hand or rolling against the odds. Thought that was really cool, so I'm super excited to get this one to the table. I also got a couple other things that go with that, where this is the regular RPG, right, the core rulebook, but I also picked up The Wanderer, which is how to play Orbital Blues solo. And it has instructions here, and you can see it uses a deck of cards, because this page will say hearts, and then it has a different entry for 2 through ace, and then you get into diamonds and spades, and I think it also uses poker chips somehow, but you don't have to actually have poker chips. You could just use any kind of little trinket that you want to use. But this looked really interesting. I'm kind of looking into a lot more solo games these days as well. And the other thing I picked up that I thought was really clever is this is an old VHS cassette tape box for Orbital Blues, and in it are these 5 pamphlets that are all, I think there's 5. Maybe there's more than 5. This looks like way more than 5. There's not 5 in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. And these are all one-shots that you can play with Orbital Blues. So I was super excited about picking that up. I'm going to do more in-depth videos on each system as well. All right, now I can't get that back in, but we're just going to put it back over there. Okay, what is next? I picked up the Last Caravan by MythWorks Games. I'm super excited about this. This is just, again, I like the size of these books. This is the only book you need for these systems. It's not like D&D where they're like, you gotta buy this book and this book and this book, and they're huge and they're expensive, and these are nice and compact. Players don't even necessarily need the book. The GM would need the book. As long as the GM has one, you could figure out how to play. But the Last Caravan says, the world we had is gone. Now all you have is a car, each other, and the road. The Last Caravan is a cars and aliens role-playing game about a midwinter road trip in the wake of an alien invasion. A normal family finding heroism in extraordinary circumstances, you'll navigate shattered North America, search abandoned towns, discover otherworldly technology, outrun alien pursuers, and fight for the future of your world. Yeah, so essentially in this, aliens have arrived, a war broke out, neither side did very well. The mothership up in orbit has kind of like exploded during the war, and all these little fragments are kind of blocking out the sun. So everything gets very cold, and you get a lot of snow. It's like the whole United States is like all very cold, snowy environment now. And essentially, you're getting a group of people together in a caravan, a bunch of travelers, that in this game, they call them, they are called, travelers. There's 7, they call them imprints. There's 7 different traveler imprints you can choose from. There's the bandage, the bruiser, the lookout, the gazer, the talker, the wrench, the innocent, and the good boy, who's a dog, which is really cool. You can play as the puppy dog in this if you want. So basically you get a playbook that has all your abilities to choose from on one sheet. The other thing I thought that was really cool with this one is you also get a page for your vehicle. I don't know if you can see that there. So you also have to keep a character sheet for the vehicle that you're traveling across the country in, and it tracks the fuel, the wear on the car, the repair, any modifications, what you're storing, things like that. The type of actions you can do in this game are named really cool things. These are the different actions anybody can do. Be the boss, do science, drive a car, fight under pressure, harmonize with alien stuff, lie and trick, rig and repair, search and survey, sneak around, take aim, or talk it out. Also, your character in The Last Caravan has to choose an inadequacy, which is kind of really interesting. You can choose from regret, recklessness, fear, detachment, or blame. This also uses D6s, but this one is a dice pool system. So you're not just rolling 2, adding them together and adding a stat. You're creating a pool of D6s based on your rating and the type of action you want to do. So you basically roll the pool and then find the highest die, and that determines what happens. So a 6 is a critical success. 4 and a 5 is success with a consequence. 1, 2, or 3 is a fail and something goes wrong, which they refer to as a trouble. You also track what's called heroism points in this game, which sounds really cool. You can spend heroism to either add more dice to your pool, find a useful item, or increase the damage on a successful attack that you've done. So that sounds really neat. And this uses clocks, kind of like Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy does, to track some narrative events that are going on. And yeah, I think this looks really awesome too. I'm super excited. This is a short, quick read. I read half of it on the plane on the way home and have kind of looked through the other half, but this looks really cool as well, and that was MythWorks. All right, what have we got next? I've got some notes jotted down here, so I'm trying to keep them in the same order. Ooh, this is actually the last one I bought, and I was super excited about this one. This is called Urban Shadows, and this is from Magpie Games. This is very similar to Vampire the Masquerade without being quite so political, I think, quite so rules heavy, and you're not all vampires. In fact, it does say you want everybody in the party to be something different, and you can choose between, there's 12 different playbooks in this. They're called the Aware, the Fae, the Hunter, the Imp, the Oracle, the Spectre, the Sworn, the Tainted, the Vamp, they're still vampires, the Veteran, the Wizard, and the Wolf. So there's a lot of cool things you can pick in here. Like I said, they said no 2 players should be picking the same because the game is about tensions between metropolitan communities. So the starting cast needs to be as diverse and conflicted as possible, just like the city itself. It says, so in this game, you have 4 stats. You have blood, heart, mind, and spirit. And it does use predetermined stats. You pick a playbook, it actually already has the stats all worked out for you. You're going to have a stat at -1, a stat at +0, and 2 of them at +1. And then it tells you that you can add a +1 to any other stat you want. So you do get to modify it a little bit, but it's trying to keep the game balanced here. This isn't like a fantasy setting where you, like D&D, where you can try to build like a super overpowered character or anything. It also includes things that they call circles. There are 4 different circles in this book. It's kind of like, they're considered like, I guess like social circles is kind of what they sound like. So you have a rating in each one to show how much your character understands how each circle works. Those are also predetermined, but you get to add a +1 into one of them. And this really neat. This uses a system of debts, which I thought was really cool, which is basically a network of favors or obligations that bind the PCs to each other in terms of their backstory and ongoing relationships. So there's mechanics in here for cashing in on a debt, right? Or going in debt to somebody else. There are 7 basic moves in this game. They are called turn to violence, escape a situation, persuade an NPC, mislead, distract, or trick, figure someone out, keep your cool, or let it out, which is using your turn to have the dark forces in you, like activate your powers, which is really cool. There's also separate moves for your circle stats. There are circle moves, put a name to a face, hit the streets, study a place of power, and also debt moves that have to do with those debts I talked about. Do someone a favor, overlook a harm, cash in a debt, or refuse to honor a debt. And then there are city moves, which are kind of, it sounds very similar to downtime, the way some games have downtime where there's not really a lot of action going on, but characters do things to kind of manipulate the world or fix themselves or whatever. So for city moves, you have weaken someone's standing, put out the word, consult your contacts, or tend to business. Now, with this game, you also track your corruption, and each playbook has a different trigger that will trigger your corruption, and corruption can be spent to alter situations, which is kind of really cool. This also uses a 2d6 system, not the pools like Caravan, 2d6. So you roll 2d6s, add them together, and then add a stat. A 7 or up is a success, a 6 or lower is a miss, but it says a miss isn't always a failure. It just means that something, like some interesting twist happens as well. So like a 10 or up is a strong hit and you might get a bonus with it. A 7 to 9 is a weak hit, so it's kind of like success with complications. And then again, a 6 or lower isn't necessarily a failure. It just means something really interesting happens. So, and this is a beautiful book. I really love the color scheme of it, of like the purple, black, and white. And when I purchased this over at their booth, they also actually gave me 2 free nice purple frosted D6s to use to play with this. So I'm super excited about that one too. I'm gonna put that right there. Okay, next up we have Wildsea that also came from MythWorks. Same place as The Last Caravan. This I'm super excited about as well. It's graphically so interesting. It is a horizontal book, whereas, you know, most of your books are vertical like this. This one actually lays out horizontal, and the artwork in it's really cool. So it's very different. This also is a D6 dice pool system. So you're looking at your stat to see how many D6s you're going to be rolling, make the roll, and take the highest result. Now, they also have an additional rule that anytime there's doubles come up in the pool, doesn't have to be the highest die, just any doubles, it will trigger a twist, which is something extra and unexpected happens, which I thought was really cool. And it also says that anyone else at the table, other than the player who rolled the doubles, can determine what the twist is. So it doesn't have to be a DM thing. Some of the players can contribute to what they think the twist would be in this situation. I did say just DM has the final say if people come up with multiple things and can't really decide on something. You also can make cuts, what they call cuts from the roll for difficulty. So instead of doing like an advantage disadvantage system, they do cuts. So if something is difficult, you may have to cut the highest die off of your roll or the top 2 highest dice off of your roll, and then look at what's left when determining if you succeeded or not. I thought that was really interesting. And it looks at the impact of your roll, which is the measure of how effective your roll was. Was it low, normal, high, or massive effect? So one of the things you can do is like trade different effects. You can have certain abilities that like raise or lower the impact of the roll. Thought that was really neat. And this also has progress measurements if you're working towards a goal, but instead of using clocks, it uses what they call tracks, which is basically just little circles or squares that can be filled in, connected with lines. So it's basically just a different way of representing the segments in a clock. Just kind of their little take on it, which was cool. It tells you that you can build your character as a young gun, which is best for campaign play, or an old dog, which is best for one-shots. But it does say that you can freeform your character completely from scratch if you want. The building characters gets a little more involved in this, kind of similar to D&D, where you have a whole bunch of different choices that you can pick from. But like I said, you can just freeform it from scratch, or you can use a quick start character, which is best, they said, for those one-shots, but also for new players. So what it does is, if I can find any of the characters real quick. Oh yeah, here's one. Like, here's the mushroom people. Here's about them. But then over here, there's, in the margin, there's a little quick start guide where you can just go with these choices to just get up and running real quick, which I thought was great. So in this, you pick a bloodline, an origin, and a post. Now, I hadn't really mentioned this, but let me get into what a post is. Your post is your position on the ship. Essentially, in this world called Wildsea, the planet has been taken over with plants, okay? And it's so thick and dense that you can't live down on the surface anymore. So people just, well, dark, bad things happen way down in the surface because, like, all the lights blocked out and it's like a whole big tight mess of like roots and everything. So basically you're operating in kind of like a sky ship or an airship up above all this foliage, okay? And you also get to design a ship, like your crew gets to make a ship together, and you're going to decide what your ship has. But that's why you have a post. It's what your position is on the ship. And kind of the world is in separate layers in sense of like how thick the foliage is. But way down near the surface of the planet where it's the thickest, like bad stuff happens down there. So people don't really ever go down there. You can play as a human. Oh, I just lost my spot. Hold on one second. Wildsea. There we go. You can play as a ardent, which is a human, an ectus, which is a cactoid person, a gao, which is a fungal humanoid, so it's like a mushroom person, ironbound, and that says it is ship spirits with driftwood bodies. That sounds amazing. A ketra, which says it is a gelatinous, tech-savvy, bioelectric type humanoid. A moth, which is an insect bloodline. And this one's really hard to pronounce. Zelicrae? I don't know. I'm probably not saying that right. Which are basically spider colonies wearing humanesque skins. So the types of creatures you make with this are really, really interesting. It's a very different kind of world. But for the posts on the ship, you can choose from things like alchemist, char, which is the chef, corsair, crash, dredger, hacker, horizoneer, hunter, mesmer, navigator, rattlehand, screw, slinger, steep, surgeon, tempest, and word bearer. And like I said, you also get to design your ship, which you pick the size, the frame, the hull, the engine, and then any, like the motifs of it, any additions on it, the armaments, and then if there are others NPCs on board as a crew. And in this game, the GM is called the Firefly, which I thought was really cool. But I've heard great things about this game as well. This is Wildsea, and I can't wait to get this one to the table too. I'm going to have to start making another pile over here. Okay, next up we have, let's see, Die RPG. This one is from Rowan, and I was very excited to get a hold of this too. Now, I've looked through this, and it's very, very different. This actually started out as a comic book series, and in the comic, you have a group of real-world, deeply flawed adults that are transported into a fantasy world via a predatory, sinister role-playing game. So they get like sucked into the role-playing game, okay? It's kind of like, then once they're in there, they kind of have to make the decision, do we want to go back to the real world or do we want to stay in the game? Very interesting. So in this, you can play as a dictator, a fool, an emotion knight, a godbinder, or a neo. And the GM is called the Master, but they're still considered a character in this. They actually have a character sheet with stats for themselves. Now, this uses the same 6 stats as D&D. You have strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, charisma, but they're only numbered 1 through 4. Sorry, 0 through 4. They're 0 through 4. And they said that 2 is like an average person. 5, something like off the charts, would be like supernatural, so it only goes up to 4. They also have a defensive stats like guard, health, willpower, and deference that are derived from a main stat and then modified by whatever equipment you have. This also uses a D6 dice pool system, and then you end up adding or subtracting more dice for advantages or disadvantages. So when you roll with this one, anything 4 and up is a success. success. Now, if the GM has set a difficulty for your roll, and this would be something low, like difficulty 0, difficulty 1, difficulty 2, that's how many successes you have to remove from the pool, and then see if you have any successes left over to count. I thought that was kind of neat. So if once you've removed dice and you have some successes, if any of them are actually a 6 or higher, you can activate special abilities with the 6s. You can also use 1 flashback per session to get advantage on a task by recalling an event in the real world to provide insight or motivation to a current problem. I thought this was really cool. We know Blades in the Dark uses flashbacks. This is just one that in that game you pay for flashbacks with stress. So as long as you have enough stress, you can keep having them. But this one is just 1 flashback per session. And like I said, you're kind of, if you're in the game as your fantasy character, you're kind of recalling an event that happened to your real world character in the real world that would help in the situation. It has really interesting advancement maps, if I can find one. Like this is the Neo. Whoops. And this is like the Neo advancement map. And it's all sorts of little triangles. And as you move up and you can get the thing that touches it out of the next triangle. So in each triangle, there's just 3 choices. You can't just all of a sudden pick what's up here. You have to find your way there in a path that touches it. So if you start to head over this way, you'd have to get the abilities over here before you can get back up over here. I hope that makes sense, but I thought it was really interesting. So let's see. This also, the Dungeon Master, called the Master, like I said, has an actual character sheet. And one of the abilities that the Dungeon Master has, it's actually called Hardcore Cheating. Okay, now they actually earn cheat tokens equal to the number of players that are in the game. And when you can totally like undo something as cheating as a DM, right? And it said what you would do is take a D20 and like under the table, put it in one hand and make a character guess what hand it's in. And if they fail and you had it in the other hand, you get away with the cheating. And then if they guess correctly and it is in the right hand, the powers that be notice you and your cheat fails. I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, in Die RPG, they call the characters paragons. That was interesting. And each one is actually associated with a specific die. So, like, somebody gets the D4, the D6, the D8, the D10, the D12, and the DM gets the D20 as your paragon die. And basically, on your character sheet, you will have certain abilities that tell you can add your die, your special die, into the pool. So everybody at least gets like, you know, a special die that can be added to the pool. And the book here actually has instructions to have a first-time game as like 2 short sessions. It's called Rituals, and it gives you instructions on how to continue that on to like a bigger game after that. There's a chapter also in here on how to do a whole campaign if you're going to go even longer than that. There's a bunch of GM info to help prep for each class or paragon, as you would call it, to make sure that they really have an opportunity to have a chance to shine in the story, which I thought was really cool. And in this game, too, it also has the Dungeon Master asking the players lots of questions to help build the story together. So I thought that was really cool. But this is very different, right? You're playing a real world person that has a character sheet, and then you're also playing like somebody that gets sucked into a role-playing game. And then it's like, do we want to go back to real life or do we want to stay in the game? All right, next up is Spire. This is also from Rowan Rook and Deckard. This game looks very cool to me. It says, you are a dark elf. You have sworn in blood and sacred shadow to destroy your oppressors. The Elfir, high elves from the frozen north who have claimed your homeland as their own. And the Spire, it says, is a mile-high metropolis city, and you hide in its crumbling temples, its lawless undercity, its labyrinth tunnels, the rotting hole in reality that festers at its center. So basically, you are all a bunch of drow, dark elves, that are being oppressed by a bunch of high elves as in society, and you're kind of like trying to organize a revolution to overthrow them and take your home back. And I thought this sounded really cool as well. So this is a D10 system. This one is. Okay, so you roll a certain number of D10s. I don't remember actually if it's just 2 D10s or if it's a pool. Yeah, I think it's a pool of D10s. A 1 would be a critical fail, because a lot of times you're just going to be rolling 1. A lot of times it's just 1d10, but there are ways that you can add more d10s, which is good because it would make it impossible to roll a 1. A 1 is a critical fail and you take double stress. So this game also tracks stress as well. A 2 through 5 is a failure that takes stress. A 6, 7 is a success at a cost that still takes stress. An 8, 9 is a success that doesn't take any stress. And a 10 is a critical success, and it allows you to inflict extra stress for each 10 that you rolled on somebody else, like if you're fighting somebody. All right, so it says you can add d10s to make a pool if you have the skill or the domain that you need, like if you're proficient in it, essentially. Allows you to add extra d10s. Also, if you have mastery in that skill or domain, you get to add even another. Okay, so you're not adding these together. I'm remembering it now. It's making a pool of d10s and you take the highest. So obviously the more d10s you add increases your chances of a good roll. The highest result is what matters, unless you had multiple 10s, which is really good for handing out extra stress. Now the GM is going to subtract dice from your pool for difficulty. They might subtract 0, 1, or 2 dice depending on how difficult the task is. Now if you took any stress from that roll, right, meaning you rolled a 1 through 7, the GM is then going to roll a d10 and compare it to your current stress level to decide if there's any fallout. Okay? Now you can resist things happening to you with some other stats that are called blood, mind, silver, shadow, reputation, and armor. So this thing just sounds really cool. The skills in this book for characters are called compel, deceive, fight, fix, investigate, pursue, resist, sneak, and steal. And as far as domains, which is kind of like your class in a sense. So they have academia, commerce, crime, high society, low society, occult, and order. All right. So that's, and religion and technology as well. So in this, you also make bonds with NPCs. As rewards for recruiting allies or achieving objectives within this revolution that you're trying to do. There is no initiative system for combat in this, which I thought was really interesting. And you can request some of the people you're bonded to do favors for you on your behalf. So it's kind of neat because like every die roll comes with the risk of taking stress. And then there's certain things you can do to like get rid of the stress. In character creation, you are choosing durance. What they said was what you were doing before the resistance. Were you an acolyte, an agent, a builder, a dealer, duelist, enlisted guard, human, emissary? There's a lot of these. Hunter, information broker, killer, laborer, occultist, personal assistant, pet, sage, or spy. Right, so that is Spire. And again, that is Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. And then the last one I picked up, also from Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, is Heart. It says The City Beneath. So the interesting thing is this uses the exact same system pretty much as Spire. And this is kind of above ground, right? Because you have the mile-high city. But this is in the same world, but below the ground. So this one says, mages hooked on illegal magic, desperate for another hit. Ruins ancient beyond reckoning, overgrown with bone and sinew. A sunken moon that calls the faithful ever deeper. So this one says it's a tabletop role-playing game about delving into a nightmare undercity that will give you everything you've ever dreamed of or kill you in the process. It's a dungeon-crawling, story-forward tabletop RPG that focuses on what characters have to lose in pursuit of their dreams in the chaotic darkness beneath the world. So the interesting thing about this one is it's a slight modified version of the resistance system that's inspired. This one, your 5 resistances are blood, echo, mind, fortune, and supplies. So it said when you're about to make a roll, you want to look at the resistances you have and figure out what kind of stress you'll mark if you fail and make your decision on how you want to resist based on that. The DM is determining the difficulty of your roll, whether it's standard, risky, dangerous, or impossible before the roll is made. And you can use protections to reduce the amount of stress that you take if you fail or if you don't do well on the roll. And that comes from your class, your calling, your equipment, and your abilities. So this is also a D10 dice pool system. The number of die you roll is going to depend on your skill in your domain and if you have mastery in either of those. And the higher the result, the better you succeed and the less stress you take. So the rules for both of these are not that complicated at all, which I think is great. They keep it simple and they're kind of like focusing more on the story. So the skills in Heart are Compel, Delve, Discern, Endure, Evade, Hunt, Kill, and Mend. Oh, and Sneak as well. And then for the domains, like it's kind of like your class again, you can either be Cursed, Desolate, Haven, Occult, Religion, Technology, Warren, or Wild. So again, when you have proficiency in a thing, it's called having a knack. And that actually gets you an extra D10 to your pool. So there's ways to make the pool bigger, which increases your odds of rolling well. In this, you are either going to be a dark elf, a high elf, a human, or a gnoll. That's it, pretty easy. And for classes, we have things like Cleaver, Deadwalker, Heretic, Hound, Junk Mage, Witch. Very cool. And you have a calling in this one, which is things like, are you an adventurer? Is enlightenment your calling? Forced, Heart Song, Pertinent. It's really, really very interesting, I thought. So this is all the stuff that I picked up at GenCon. I am going to do individual videos on each of these, a little more in-depth of how the game system works, but at least that kind of gives you an idea of what the world is like, what the main mechanics are, and the theme and stuff of the games that I picked up at GenCon. Let me know in the comments down below which one you want me to do a review of first. And if this was helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and hit that like button. So share it out to more people so that more people can find us here. And again, I am Kristen, and this is Kristen's Epic Adventures. If tabletop role-playing games are your thing, you found a home, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Now you're going to want to watch one of the videos in the next screen. Go ahead and click on that, and I'll meet you there.